Hi, I'm Carl Miller, and today I'm going to tell you about my research topic, the findings, and the conclusion that I came to in terms of the effects of non-military events on the military performance at the Battle of Brooklyn, August 1776. So how did things outside of the military's control affect George Washington and the Continental Army's performance during the battle? And kind of I broke it down into a few different categories. First is the economic circumstances of the Continental Congress, of the new nation, the United States. So due to the inability of the Continental Congress to tax the states, the army that George Washington was leading at Brooklyn, they didn't have equipment. So they didn't have artillery that could match that the British brought to bear. There was no organized navy outside of makeshift civilian vessels. The weapons, I think there was nearly 2,000 soldiers who arrived without weapons to actually fight with. They were low on powder, didn't have uniforms, didn't have shoes. And part of the reason behind this and the effects on the military was that the states retained all the power. The Articles of Confederation hadn't even been written yet, so there's definitely no consolidated power like the Constitution. And so really what the Continental Congress was doing was they were asking for contributions rather than demanding those contributions from the states for tax revenue to support the army. And on top of that, there was a poor transportation system. So prior to the American Revolution, generally the colonies traded with Britain rather than trading with each other. So there wasn't the transportation system there, and there wasn't a tax system to start building that transportation system. There was also a training deficit that I found. So due to the colonial belief and later the state belief in the militia, the training wasn't standardized for the Continental Army at this time in August of 1776. So there were different levels of training for the troops that George Washington received. They hadn't extended the times of service, so that the army was new. It was continuously new throughout the war. Republican ideology led to this, so he couldn't discipline the troops in a way that made them more effective. And then there was also less troops, partially due to the Continental Congress's limited amount of power, to where they couldn't raise troops in a manner that supplied George Washington with the army the size of what the British were able to bring to Brooklyn. And then there was a terrain deficit. So the Continental Congress had decided on the location of the area that George Washington was to defend. So it was a political decision, poor decision on terrain that was indefensible because it was surrounded by water on three sides. It was a little tongue of land. George Washington had to split his army between Brooklyn and Manhattan. So he had to divide his force, which goes against some of the principles of military success, and that you want to mass your force, especially if you're facing an army that has larger numbers than you. So splitting them, he couldn't bring the full power to bear. And the British were able to take Manhattan because of Washington's small force and because they could use their navy. So poor decision there. The one thing that the Continental Army had on their side, and maybe they didn't feel such at Brooklyn, but later, was they felt that God was on their side. So you had all these things that negatively impacted the Continental Army in the Battle of Brooklyn, and partially the feeling that the colonial states that the United States were in the right, that they were a pure nation, that they were fighting for the way that God wanted the nation to be, was one thing that assisted them to rally their spirits and win later in the war. Thank you very much.